Hello and welcome to the how to use video for the Minecraft world generator. There's a couple things you're going to need for this. So you're going to want to have Blender installed. In this video we'll be using Blender 4.0.1, but anything above Blender 3.6.5 roughly you'll be able to use just the same. And you'll want to go ahead and download the project from my website. It's free. You can find that in the link in the description. Also, if you haven't seen the original video, you can go ahead and watch that. The link is also going to be in the description. So let's go ahead and dive into it. So first of all, when you first open it up, everything is gray, but you can view the textures here in Display Render Preview, and those will load in. You'll want to make sure that you unzip the file completely, or else the textures won't show up and everything will be pink. So if you see pink textures, make sure to unzip everything, and you should be good to go. Of course, if you have any questions or comments or any issues, leave those in the comment section and I'll do my best to help out. But let's get into it. So first things first, just a couple notes on things we can do. First is if you have Shift tilde, if you press those, you can enter this like fly view mode, and that lets you use WASD to move around, and then Shift lets you speed up, and so you can kind of fly around these worlds. And you can also use the center scroll wheel to teleport to wherever you're looking. So you can teleport over to this pig and just jump around like this. And of course we can switch back to our camera with 0. There's a camera here by default, or if you don't have a full number pad, you can use tilde and then view camera. So let's go over some of these tools that you have in the side panel. If you don't see those, go ahead and make sure you have the actual node setup selected. If you have, for example, like the camera selected, it's not going to show up here. So make sure you select the world that you have, and then under the modifiers tab, these will show up. So you can switch back and forth between these overlays by hitting this button. So if you just want to see the world without all the outlines and cameras and stuff, you can hit this. So our first option is size. So by default it's set at 50. You can do this all the way down to, if we do 1, it'll just be a tiny little world. Actually 0 is the smallest, so a 1 by 1. The default maximum here is 250. But if you'd like to go above that, you can hit it and manually type it in. Those parameters are there for performance and just to keep the world from breaking. But all of these, even though they have set limits, you can override those by just typing in any number. Especially this world size, if you go much above, say like 300, 350, it's going to take a really long time to generate those worlds because they get exponentially bigger. So just keep that in mind, but you can play around with any of these settings and adjust them to your heart's content. But let's go ahead and plug in 250. And it's going to take the world quite a while to generate, up to a minute, 2 minutes. But once it generates, we'll have a pretty stable, fast-running view of it. So I'll go ahead and cut to when the world actually shows up. Alright, so now we have a much larger world, but you can see it's running very stably, good frame rate. We can actually look at the frame rate specifically by turning these overlays on, and if we just hit play here, you can see it's running at about 60 frames per second. So that's not bad at all. Let's go ahead and use that Shift tilde to fly around our world. Let's teleport over to this mountain here. We can see it's quite a decently large world size, plenty to see in the distance. And of course we can fly, in this case through the floor. We could fly into these caves, take a look around at the ores all the way down. So yeah, there's a lot of exploring you can do. And again, it runs at a pretty stable frame rate, so no issues there. One thing about world sizes is if they are large, you will have to wait for the world to entirely regenerate if you mess with any of the settings. So what I generally recommend is keeping this world size fairly small, like 30 to 50. So any world changes you made are pretty quick and they don't take like a full 2 minutes every time. And then once you find settings that you're happy with, then cranking the world size up to something bigger. So let's go ahead and bring this back down to 50. Okay, much faster. And we can start playing around with some of these other things. So scroll X and Y let you move the world over a block at a time. So just pretty much what it says, scrolls X or scrolls along Y. So you can even animate these values if you'd like. So for example, if we go to 0, we'll change this scroll X to 0, and then put a keyframe in here by hitting this dot, and then we can jump to frame 250, and then change this to like 50. And then just so we can see it in real time better, let's just change this to a world size of 20. And then if we play this, you'll see that it's animating the scroll. So you can also animate these. It's a lot of fun to see the world change and all that. But most of the time you're going to have to render those out so you can see them in a reasonable frame rate, because let's see, this is running at, who knows, yeah, around 5 frames a second. So there definitely are limits, but if you're doing renders, then you're going to see those results a lot better. So let's go ahead and clear those keyframes. Just reset this to the default value. You can do this by just selecting the value and then hitting backspace. Same with this. Cool. So one of the new features is the time. And this is in 24-hour time, so 12 o'clock noon. We can do, say, like midnight, 24 hours. And this will spawn in hostile mobs. So you can see like a zombie appeared here. And then, of course, he will despawn when we go back to day. So if we go to, let's say, 8 o'clock in the morning, he's gone. There also are special lighting for dawn and sunset. So if we go to 6 in the morning, you'll have this nice red light. Same with, say, like 6 o'clock p.m. There's this sunset lighting. So yeah, you can mess around with that, get some more interesting lighting, and then of course have hostile mobs. The seed, pretty self-explanatory, just like actual Minecraft. You can just type in a seed here. So let's say like 84, and then we get a totally new world. You can just click these arrows and just generate a new seed in either direction. Now the stone layer height affects the bottom stone layer. So you'll notice there's a top stone layer with coal and iron, and then there's this layer that has the gold, redstone, it's got diamond and lapis as well. And so we can move that down. So for example, if we go all the way to 0, that layer just completely disappears, and we can even go, say, 150. If we type that in, take a while to generate, and then we have this really tall chunk here with all the caves and everything. And so yeah, that's quite fun to mess around with. You have these caves tunneling into each other going all the way down. So yeah, sweet. Now we have the terrain height and prominence. These are both pretty similar settings that allow you to control how high the terrain is. So for example, if we go down to 0.5, the terrain is very, very flat. And we can go up to, the max setting here is 7.5. But of course we can make that even higher if we type in, say, like 25, and it will go a little crazy with these large worlds that are at this point they're kind of falling apart because there's almost too much prominence, but you can mess around with this, get some really funky results. And part of this, the reason these are showing up is because these caves are in here. So if we turn these caves off, this will just become stone again. But yeah, you can get some pretty neat looking stuff here. So let's reset that to the default. And then this biome size changes how big each terrain feature is. So by default 7.9. If we go all the way up, scroll to 9.96, the biome sizes become much larger. Now keep in mind that they look quite a bit flatter. Like this mountain is now a lot smoother. So there is this lock height to size feature that tries to compensate for that. So it makes the terrain size taller as the biome size gets bigger, and vice versa. And so we can always, of course, manually do this. So if you'd like to manually override this setting by turning it off, and then we can go and change this to like 25 or something. And then we get this nice tall mountain. Now it's kind of hard to see this biome size in its fullest with a world size that's not very big. So let's change this back to 250. We'll wait for it to generate, and then you'll be able to see more of the biomes.
One eternity later.
All right, so that took some time to generate, but here we have quite an impressive sight. This massive mountain. So we've got some cliffs in here, yeah. So this is manually overriding the large biome size with a massive terrain height. Then we get this absolutely huge mountain, and so you can really get some cool stuff to show up with just playing around with the settings. So this is just one example of that. But let's go ahead and reset this to the more default values here. So back to 50, back to default. All right, so now caves. You can see caves are off. If we turn them on, these, you can completely disable them, but there's also some settings to adjust them. So first we have cave roughness. So the higher this value is, the more rugged the edges of the caves will be. So you get more of this like grainy texture to them, but they're smoother if this is lower. We have cave openness, and so pretty much what it sounds like, the higher this value is, the more open the caves are. So you get more caves connecting to other caves, all the way down to, if this is 0, you just get pretty much no caves at all. And last but not least, we have cave scale. So as we change this scale down, it opens it up. So it's basically scaling up the individual caves or making them smaller. Next we have mobs on/off, so we can completely disable mobs. This will also disable hostile mobs at night, but we can also change how rare they are. So this value moves pretty quick, so you might miss it, but all the way down to this, pretty much no mobs appear. But if we go to the other extreme, then we have mobs everywhere. And so, yeah, happy medium between those two. Mobs don't spawn on water, but they spawn everywhere else. So if we change this to say like 0.5, and then we can change like time to 24, so midnight, and then we'll see those hostile mobs are also multiplied. Back to the defaults for those. Now we also have tree rarity, which is almost the exact same thing, except instead of mobs, it's trees. So we can have pretty much no trees if we turn this to 0, or we can have total dense forest if we go all the way up to 1. Now trees only spawn on green grass, so they don't spawn on snow, sand, or water. But I think it looks pretty cool when you have super dense forest. Let's go to say like 0.7. maybe let's say 0.55. We'll get this nice dense forest here. We can fly around that. Just kind of walk around the forest. It's a little too dense to walk around, but still looks cool from the outside. Oop. There we go. Reset that to default value. And then last but not least, we have grass rarity. Same thing as mobs and trees, just for this top layer of grass. So this next feature is an interesting one, coal internal faces. So the way the actual game of Minecraft works is if two faces touch each other, they get deleted, or not rendered at all, basically, because if two faces are touching, they're not visible. And so it saves a ton of rendering. So the old version of the world generator, each face of every cube, so all 6 faces would get rendered, and that adds up pretty quickly. And so you can imagine that even a small world would have just tons and tons of polygons that are unnecessary. So this coal internal faces will get rid of those faces that are on the inside. So if we change our view to the inside of the world, we can see that it's hollow. Actually, we can especially see this if we turn caves off. This whole area is just empty. So this is a ton of faces that aren't being unnecessarily rendered. If we turn this on, off. If we turn this off, you'll notice that the faces are everywhere. So one thing to note about this is it does take some time to calculate. So yeah, if you have a large world, say like 250 by 250, you're saving a lot of polygons that Blender doesn't have to render anymore, but it still has to calculate which faces are touching. It will make the end product run quite a bit faster. It will just take more time to get to that, but it can be the difference between a frame rate of like 10 and a frame rate of 60. So what I would recommend is if you're using smaller world sizes, like 25, even up to like 50, the frame rate difference is pretty minimal, but it's a lot faster for changes if you have this off, because it doesn't have to calculate all those touching faces. So you'll notice if we have a world size of 20 and we use this scroll X, it's almost instant versus turning coal internal faces on. And there's a lot more of a delay. And that delay just gets amplified as you get bigger worlds. So just keep that in mind. It's not a bad idea to have this off for world sizes of roughly 0 to 50 or 75, but anything bigger than that, I definitely recommend having this on. Now the next feature is the Netherize button, and as you might imagine, hitting that will convert our world into the Nether version. And some of these settings work, some of them don't. So for example, the size still works. The scroll X and Y works as well. The time does not, because the Nether doesn't have the sun. This seed does work, so you can regenerate the Nether just like you do the overworld. The stone layer height doesn't work because there's not a stone layer in the Nether. But we also have some settings that are unique to the Nether, like this Nether ceiling height. So this affects the how tall this is. And you can get some cool results with this. So if we bring it all the way down to here, for example, then these layers will collide almost, making this cool like cave look. And of course, you can bring it all the way up to say 0, and then it will be quite a bit removed. Now the last setting we have on here is the Nether floor rarity. This is essentially the same as just like these tree, mob, and grass rarities. It just affects how many of these mushrooms and fire show up. So if we change this to 0, nothing, all the way up to 1, where there's just fire and mushrooms everywhere. So this gives a lot of flexibility, a lot of control to make these unique worlds and customize them. Just a couple final notes. First of all, by default, the renderer is set to Eevee, but you can get better results if you use cycles. the lighting just looks better, although it's not real time. So if you have this render view, it's not going to be quite as quick and snappy. But you'll notice the lighting just seems more realistic. This especially is true of the Nether, because the lava has this glow to it. If we switch back to Eevee, you'll notice not quite the same. So depends on what you're doing with it. If you're trying to get some cool looking renders, then I definitely recommend Cycles. But if you're just messing around with the world settings, Eevee's probably the way to go, because you have real-time rendering. The default camera, 0. Of course, you can move that around. So if we go to the scene here, select that camera, we can go to the settings. So if you make a bigger world, we can change that scale to zoom in and out. And of course, with the camera selected, we can also move it around. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, if you have any questions or comments, leave those in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to help you out and get back to you. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed and found this useful, and I will look forward to seeing you in the next video.